All right, so we have the final segment, which is about the future of fintech. And we're very, very lucky to have three amazing people to lead this with us. And then we have three amazing people who are the entrepreneurs who are in the front line, who are actually out there in the cold face doing stuff. And their challenges, and we need to be addressing them also. The future of fintech channel is something that we've already started working on. Mirna and I, we collaborated and have come together as partners on this a few months ago, and then the summer came, and now we're back again. Why is fintech so important? I mean, these are just some core facts to build context. $100 billion worth of disruption. 90% of existing bank jobs would be lost in the next 10 years. 90%. 600 million new jobs needed. 3.5 billion unbanked people need to get engaged in some way, shape, or form. And 2.2 trillion by 2020 in terms of job losses. So when you look at this kind of context, fintech is absolutely critical. Meena, just tell us your story and inspire us for a couple of minutes of how you started in Lebanon and came here.
Thank you, Tariq. Hi, everyone. I'm Lebanese, and just like our friend, Miss Prestige, is that your name? I love your family name. I come from a country, I'm like a country mouse, and I've been through a lot of wars. I mean, there's no war in Lebanon that I haven't survived. So I've survived all these kind of wars, and I studied English literature, so don't ask me how I got here, but anyway.
When she says wars, it's actual wars.
Actual wars. I lost 2 houses, and I actually survived, bombed down and all that, and then I moved to Dubai as a financial journalist. And that's when I realized that, governments are starting to get lost between, regulating and leaving the market to innovate. The whole ecosystem is completely disconnected, and I thought, okay, maybe I will institutionalize what I do, which is, as a journalist, you connect a lot of people, and provide a platform that actually brings the ecosystem together, and that's what Fintech Galaxy is all about.
So here's the ecosystem that we need.
Right.
Meena, are we ready for this? Is this region ready for this?
See, for you to have an ecosystem, you need to have talent, and this region has really amazing talent, right? You need to have the money, liquidity. The region has a lot of liquidity. I mean, we export money into the outside world.
Yeah.
You need to have technology, mobile penetration, and all that. We have it all. You need to have banks. We've got huge banks, and we have a lot of, banking systems. But what we don't have, and if you look at the gap between MENA region and the global, during the first half of the year, around $50 billion were invested in fintech. 50, okay? In this part of the world, you barely reach 50 million. So what's keeping this region behind? It's actually the ecosystem is not connected,
right.
Okay? So regulators are not working closely with banks and startups to open the market. There are some structural challenges into the system that need to change.
Yeah.
So opening, an app on a phone is not going to change how banking is done,
Sure.
right? And investing, 100 million here and 100 million there won't change it. You've got to have some really big initiatives that cascade from top bottom and bottom up to change the whole, region.
Our other guest is Mohammed. Mohammed is he's very cool. I mean, he's one of the coolest dudes in town.
Thank you.
Seriously. And I saw you a few months ago at DTech. I remember that's when I met last year, when I met you first time. Tell us about your company, the fact that you pay your people with Bitcoin, right?
No, actually Dubai coin, which is a currency
Dubai
that
coin,
we
even-
created. So.
Okay, so you don't deal with real money anymore.
No, not really. No.
Brilliant.
So we pay over 20 people that works with me with a currency that we created. So we pay them fake money. At that time, when I started with the bank, and I was about 22 years old, and I was in a group called the Enterprise Architects.
Right.
And these people are, we are a group of 4. 3 of them, the youngest is about 56 years old. So it was a really tough, to keep up or to convince them, because they don't give you anything to work on. You're that kid, coming in and trying to prove yourself to people, just like, yeah, sure, go and bring us some coffee or something. Anyway, so they decided to give me something, to keep me occupied. They told me, okay, you know what, we'll create something called the Innovation Lab. we'll put you there. You seem very interested about that. Go and research certain technologies and what is the impact of those technologies on the future of banking. I came up with that recommendation. It's like, okay, you know what, guys, there's this cool technology that's going to change the way banking works. Not only banking, but the way we perceive economy.
Yeah.
And I told them to invest in Bitcoin. Was in 2011 March time. So Bitcoin was about $3 at that time. Anyways, so they told me no, it will die in a year or two, and of course it didn't. Bitcoin went all the way up to $20,000.
What is your experience in terms of I mean, we're about to get our entrepreneurs on board, and you started out as an entrepreneur. What has been your experience in terms of acceptance, in terms of tolerance to failure? You're a rich man, so you have the money, but where does the money come from?
I mean, starting with that thing, I will quote a very famous philosopher that says, you know, innovators are gonna innovate, and regulators are gonna hate. So it's not our job as entrepreneurs and innovators to care about regulation. This is not my job. My job is to disrupt, and their job is to follow up and try to contain it in a box.
Right.
Hopefully they can do that fast enough, of course. The other thing is, you know, it depends on the type of startups that you are approaching. Like one of the things that we have today, what we call initial coin offerings, and this is, you know, it comes into the blockchain area, and we are able to fund massive projects without the involvement of any of the existing ecosystem today.
Gaurav, what about you, sir? What do you do? You're a tech investor.
Where do I start? So actually, my family, I'm actually a second generation fintech entrepreneur.
Okay.
So my father actually started a payment technology company 30 years ago. So based out of Dubai, we've been working with banks and all the institutions that touch the fintech ecosystem for 35 years. So I fell into the fintech world. I did a useless law degree and then decided to come back and work for a French company and then settled into the business. But after 10 years of working in the ecosystem, I realized that there was a lot of scope for change. Today, 80% of all your transactions still happen in cash. You might have Apple Pay, you might have Google Pay, you might have everything. The right use cases still haven't come into the ecosystem where people need technology because it's not being put into play. And you know, you touch on these conversations about the existing dinosaurs of banks not innovating quick enough, and startups who are very eager to innovate but don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we actually sit right in the middle. We actually sit right in the middle to facilitate that because we have 200 fintech relationships in the region.
Right.
And because we've actually been through the entire ecosystem on the adoption curve of technology, where your earlier slide of even earlier about where you actually presenting the video, one of your slides actually talked about the adoption of technology.
Right.
Firsthand, we've had the ability to see technology moving from an idea into the ecosystem, being adopted by consumers.
Right.
Because we've delivered that technology. And we've seen that time span has actually changed from 5 to 7 years to even 10 to 15 years down to 3 years. And actually, we've introduced technology in the market which has been adopted in 6 months. And I'm talking about brand new technology. Technology that doesn't exist on a global scale, but is so secure, so simple to implement, and so beneficial across every chain in the ecosystem that financial institutions are taking on even 6 months.